Under the dim lights of Le Mans night, the blue and orange GT40 roared through the air, slicing the wind at over 200 miles per hour. On those cold, wet corners, speed was not merely a measure of victory, but the boundary between life and survival. But what made people shiver that night was not just the speed. It was the sound, rising from behind Jackie X. A sharp, clean roar. Not the heavy Detroit thunder, nor the metallic voice of Germany. It was the breathing rhythm of the Ford 289 Gurney-Weslake, a mechanical heart, forged not in a great factory, but in a discreet workshop on the English coast. An engine so refined and powerful that those who truly understood whispered that if it had lived longer, history might have taken a different course. In the mid-1960s, the racetrack was not merely a place where cars fought for fractions of a second. It was where nations contested for honor, where engineering itself became a political weapon. And the center of that battlefield was Le Mans, the most unforgiving arena on Earth, where speed had to coexist with endurance and mechanical intelligence. Ford entered not from the refined passion of racing aristocracy, but from wounded pride. Ferrari had rejected the purchase deal, and that insult demanded Detroit's answer, delivered in steel and thunder. The GT40 was born as a straight punch, a 7.0-liter engine, brutal torque, enough force to crush Italy's prancing horse. And Ford succeeded. They won, they dominated, and they believed raw power was the eternal law of victory. But Le Mans does not honor the strongest in a moment. It honors the one who survives until dawn. 24 hours of burning fuel, grinding tires, melting pistons, and testing human limits. The great machines could win a lap, but rarely an entire day. When the FIA cut the limit to 5.0 liters, Detroit saw chains. But those who understood the game saw an invitation to a new era. An era not for hammers, but for blades, fine-edged, slicing through air with technique rather than weight. Dan Gurney was the first to see that door open. And Gurney was not only a driver, he was an engineer, a strategist, and an innovator. One who believed that correct engineering did not merely make a car faster, but also stronger, cleaner, and smarter. While most of America looked back toward muscle, he looked forward to the future of intelligent efficiency. From that mindset, a great idea began to take shape. An engine that could rewrite the history of endurance racing. He began to think of what American engineers of the time dared not imagine: a lightweight alloy cylinder head, scientifically calculated air inlets, geometrically optimized combustion chambers, and the stamina to run unbroken for 24 hours. To achieve this, he decided not to follow Detroit's beaten path. Those massive foundries and cast iron lines were no place to nurture an idea so precise it bordered on obsession. So instead of looking to America's industrial valleys, he turned his eyes across the ocean, to where engineering relied not on strength, but on the art of precision. His destination was not London, Stuttgart, or Turin, but a quiet seaside town in southern England, Rye, a place no one imagined could alter the history of world racing. There lived Harry Weslake, a soft-spoken man with silver hair and the eyes of one who saw the world through the airflow past a valve stem. Not a university lab genius, not a corporate leader, but a true mechanical craftsman. A man who understood air the way a conductor understands each note of a violin. Gurney arrived with hand-drawn sketches, unusual slanted lines, perfectly rounded intake ports, heart-shaped combustion chambers, the kind that would make traditional engineers frown at first sight. Westlake did not frown. He ran his fingers along the pencil marks as if reading a score, never before played. The two needed few words. One had the intuition of a racer living in speed, the other of an engineer living amid air and hot metal. Right there in that small workshop, scented with cutting oil and alloy dust, an unspoken pact was formed. They would not build an upgrade for Ford. They would create a new heart, an engine daring enough to challenge the very foundations of Detroit itself. And from that moment, a quiet revolution began. First came the material, not the heavy cast iron that Detroit relied on. They chose aluminum alloy, lighter, better at conducting heat, yet difficult to cast and control. A bold choice at a time when most American engineers still believed that the heavier it is, the stronger it must be. Next was the way air entered the engine. No more hammer-like intake ports, but perfectly round ones like the pipes of an orchestra flute, set at a 9-degree angle instead of the traditional 20. A small difference, but enough to alter airflow velocity, letting the fuel-air mixture enter the combustion chamber straight, clean, and undisturbed. Then came the combustion chamber. Neither hemispherical nor flat, but heart-shaped, a strange geometry that compressed the mixture precisely where it needed to burn, ensuring complete combustion, maximum force, and reduced detonation risk. A design that, if presented before an engineering board at the time, would likely have been dismissed as absurd. And most importantly, the wet flow philosophy. Westlake did not chase mirror-polished surfaces. He shaped passages to keep the mixture moist, uniform, and stable through every revolution. Ensuring power came not only from airflow, but from mixture quality. When the first heads from England arrived in California, they looked like works of art from afar. But once disassembled, people saw air holes, rough cast surfaces, even hand-scratched markings that looked trembling. Many were thrown straight into scrap bins the moment they touched the test stand. John Miller, chief engineer at All American Racers, once recalled with half bitterness, half determination, "There was a time I opened the crate and found nearly half of it was junk ideal ports on paper, warped after casting. Surfaces that demanded absolute precision showed porous bubbles, and when mounted on the block, one strong rev could blow the gasket apart like paper. Mark I carried the dream. Mark II carried the hope, but both carried disappointment. In Santa Ana, many nights, the AAR shop glowed only with the light of desk lamps, the sound of grinders, and sighs. Across the ocean, Westlake and his team could not sleep either. No email, no CAD, no CNC, only pencil drawings, sand molds, and a crackling phone line. Yet they kept going, with the persistence of men who believed the world would eventually catch up with them, even if it took time. And then they found direction. Mark III was born, not only to be stronger, but to live easier. Bolt positions were refined, coolant passages reopened, metal walls thickened, casting surfaces improved. No longer a drawing board experiment. It became a design ready for war, yet it kept its original DNA: clean air, proper mixture, combustion force, traveling straight down the piston like a blade. From that foundation, the final evolution emerged: Mark V. No longer a bold idea, but a precision instrument honed to its limit. Aluminum heads were reinforced exactly at stress points, the cooling system revised according to real heat flow graphs, and the entire intake assembly lowered to drop the GT40's center of gravity. The 9-degree intake ports were refined in radius to sustain airflow velocity at high RPM, while a smaller rocker cover assembly reduced inertia and optimized engine bay layout. Notably, the carburetor flange was tilted toward the engine's center line, balancing fuel distribution and enabling faster removal during endurance pit stops, a feature that made European teams envious. The result was a 302 cubic inch block producing about 425 horsepower at 6,000 RPM. Not an explosive burst, but a steady current of power able to endure 24 hours without self-destruction. Yet the Mark V had its dark side. Tolerances were so tight that a single mistorqued bolt could ruin an entire head. It could not tolerate haste. It demanded the care of operating a concert-grade instrument. And when the Mark V was complete, only one question remained. Could an engine this delicate, this precise, survive the brutal test of Le Mans, where the Mulsanne straight stretched like an exam for those daring enough to challenge the world itself? Race day, 1968. The blue and orange GT40 rolled out of the pit silently. No need for display. Then the sound came. Not the heavy Detroit growl, not the European scream, but sharp, clean, taut like a steel string. Night fell over Sarthe. Rain, fog, roads slick as ice. European cars began to fall. Engines overheated, power faded, pit stops dragged on. But the GT40 did not rush. It only breathed, steady, precise, like a marathon runner who knows the winner is the one still moving when the sun rises. And so it was. The dawn of Le Mans, 1968, called Ford's name. Not through crushing power, but through a long, cold, disciplined breath. The paddock froze in silence. Detroit had not given up. They had only changed the way they fought. But the real test was still to come. When Porsche unleashed the 917 for the 1969 season, all of Europe waited for Ford to collapse. On the starting day of Le Mans, 1969, Jackie Ickx did not sprint to his car as tradition demanded. He walked, step by step, buckled his harness, challenged history itself. The GT40 started last and began to climb, lap by lap, through the night, through the rain tearing across the asphalt. Porsche led with speed. Ford answered with rhythm. Then came the final lap. Ickx against Hans Hermann. Two worlds, two philosophies, two mechanical civilizations. The GT40 braked impossibly late, tires howling, body leaning like a blade at the throat. And then the flag rose, Ford victorious by mere seconds just before that era closed. 2 years. The same chassis. A small engine that defeated all of Europe on its own soil. It should have been the dawn of a new Ford age. But something strange happened. The project was never expanded. No mass production plans, no commercial versions, no prolonged praise from Detroit. Everything fell silent, as if the very formula for victory had become something no one wanted to mention. Why did something that proved its power vanish so quietly? Within engineering circles, quiet questions began to spread. Did Ford not want to rely on a cylinder head they hadn't built themselves? Was the structure's sophistication too complex for mass production? Or was the marriage between a lone genius and an industrial machine simply too fragile for a corporate system to endure? Someone once said, "This engine didn't die from engineering. It was buried by politics." The original blueprints slowly disappeared from the race team's hands. The surviving heads became secret treasures. Stories of a wilder Mark VI lived only as whispers in old garages, and the engineers who once touched it spoke of an invisible weight. Tolerances too small, craftsmanship too demanding, an obsession with perfection in every micron. It was never made for the masses. It was a blade meant for master swordsmen. And history, as always, favors the cannon, not the sword. In the end, Gurney and Westlake quietly moved on to other projects, and Ford returned to its safe roadmap. But that silence left a void. Perhaps this technology had been locked away, not because it failed, but because it was too good, too singular, and belonged to no one except those who created it. Today, in the age of hybrid engines and algorithms, the surviving Westlake heads rest in the hands of a few: engineers, racers, collectors. They keep them like mechanical relics. Occasionally, one is mounted onto a 302 block, fired up in a closed workshop. And when the first spark ignites, that sound returns, tight, sharp, clean, like metal, retelling a story the world once tried to forget. There are rumors. The final blueprint still exists somewhere. Some say the Mark VI drawings resurfaced in an old workshop basement. Others swear they heard its descendant run at a vintage event in England. The sound so sharp that it set off alarms across the parking lot. If you have ever stood beside a machine and felt the sound of metal breathing, you know that legends like Gurney-Weslake never truly disappear. They only wait for the next person brave enough to wake them. Share your story, your memory, or the moment when an engine made you believe that engineering too has a soul. And if you've just discovered it, don't stop here. Dive deeper into the world where engineers are artists and metal knows how to dream. Hit subscribe to the channel. The next journey begins right now.